I don't think there's any better feeling than being able to help other people. I think voluntary giving up your time and effort to see somebody else happy is one of the greatest gifts in terms of feelings that I've ever had. When I found myself in that position of, a lot of emotional pain and discomfort, it's like being in a dark tunnel. Everything feels numb. 24 hours form was carried for the world record, and I remember getting 9 hours through carrying these 100-pound handles, and I thought I'd torn my bicep. I was like, "There's just no way I can carry on," but I know I can take one more step. Yeah, the ring walk entrance. It's always the worst part. People hate to talk about themselves, but yeah, I guess a glorified personal trainer is where my title runs to. But I've done a few things in the past few years in terms of running my own podcast for 4 years. Do a lot of stuff for men's mental health, and I'm an ambassador for Movember. And alongside with that, run a coaching app called My Coach app, which is one of the biggest fitness applications in the UK, as well as a couple of social media channels like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. So yeah, there's a few things that keep me busy, but I guess my main topic is at the moment, has been for the past year, massively around not just men's mental health, but mental health and mindset in general, and just trying to help people live a better quality of life and find themselves in a position where they're a little bit better than they were yesterday.
I think let's start there because there's so much I want to explore, man. But that kind of facet of what you do about men's mental health is super interesting. And I think for anybody that gets into a space where they're kind of trying to help others, it's normally because they've gone through something themselves. And it's quite an admirable thing to do because you're trying to get people away from a place that maybe you've been. What was kind of the first reasoning that you decided, like, I'm not this isn't just about me. I want this to be about other people too.
I guess whenever anyone goes through something, your immediate reaction is, I guess, kind of victimhood. Why has it happened to me? Or why am I feeling these things? I've never felt these things before. But one of the biggest takeaways, if you've ever been through any kind of pain, discomfort, which most people have, is that you now have the ability to empathize with other people. You now have the ability to use your own story to help others, which I don't think there's any better feeling than being able to help other people. I think, altruism and voluntary giving up your time and effort to see somebody else happy is one of the greatest gifts in terms of feelings that I've ever had. So I think knowing that your story is going to help somebody else, even though something that feels really painful, is probably one of the biggest things that you can ever do. And I think that is where, after leaning into certain pillars such as therapy and readings and looking at avenues and ways to better my own mental health, that was the big thing for me. Which I think, after you learn a lot of things and learn a lot of tactics, and you learn and read a lot of strategies around mindset, that the best way in which they sink in is to teach other people.
I think sometimes, and this is something that I think gets lost sometimes, it's the teaching that you need to constantly learn that is so important because I think until you accept that, like, we really don't know anything as people and we can constantly evolve and learn, then I think you're kind of stuck in a place where you won't evolve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always cautious as well. I think when maybe using the word teaching, because giving advice to people is even for me a thing that I'm cautious of. I always think, when I'm giving advice to people, would I take this advice myself if I was in this person's situation? Because it's very easy to give people advice when you're not in their position. It's very easy to give people advice of leave the relationship, quit the job, leave the place that you're living, when you don't have to live with the repercussions of that advice. And I know Mel Robbins gave a great example of this on a podcast. I think she was maybe on with her partner or her husband maybe, and it was talking about when the relationship was going through a bad patch and it was rocky and there's probably difficulties from a mindset and mental health perspective, and she had friends who were around her giving her advice, and she used the analogy of it's like being in a boat with your partner and weathering the storm, and friends will often come up to you with their raft or their life raft and try pulling you in, but sometimes you gotta stay in the boat. You gotta you gotta stay in that situation. You gotta communicate. You need to stay in the boat and weather the storm with your partner. And I think that was great advice to people because it's easy to get advice from, the guys or the group of gals that you may be around, and they can give advice to you really easily. But at the end of the day, it comes down to you and your partner, and you guys communicating and working on things to get to a better place if that's what you want to do.
I think that's the word as well, isn't it? Communication, particularly when it comes to like relationships and things like that. But also, when I say relationships, I don't mean just romantic relationships, like business relationships, friendships. Like, it's so easy not to talk sometimes, and you can kind of bottle up and bottle up and bottle up. And then that often leads to a way worse situation than if you had just addressed the situation before. And like, I've definitely been through that in the past where, you know, looking back, it's so easy to say, like, I should have done this. And I think sometimes that's quite an unhealthy thing to do, but it's just the decision you've made in the moment to not do it and learn from that in the future to maybe, if you do have these feelings, whether it be personal, business, etc., then you kind of address them at the point where you have them.
I think it's important that you communicate things with people because I know there's this thing at the moment that a lot of people are talking about, which is the loneliness epidemic, and especially for guys, on average, guys have between 1 to 3 close friends, and, of those, guys are usually very unlikely to open up to those people, and that's where I guess you can feel really lonely and on your own. So even just having conversations with real life people, these things exist these days where they're not just conversations on a keyboard or on a WhatsApp. Having real life conversations with people is so, so important. And if you're in a position where you feel like that and you feel isolated or lonely, I think one of the best things that you can do as a first step is to go out and have what I call micro conversations. A micro conversation is where, you know, whether you're in the Asda or the Tesco or the coffee shop having the conversation with the barista or the cashier, all these things accumulate evidence and confidence that you can have conversations with people without judgment. And then the next step will be to start to give your own opinion. What happens a lot of time when we lose self-esteem and self-confidence is that we start not giving our true opinion the way that we feel. We just become very agreeable and become in like a flow state of conversation. So I think if you're in that position, I think one, just having micro conversations, and two, starting to give your own opinion will make you feel better to then start opening up and having more conversations with people around you and that you can trust.
It's such a double negative as well, isn't it? Because, we are in that epidemic of loneliness, as you say, in a generation that is so connected. And it kind of doesn't make any sense whatsoever because, like, we're constantly speaking to people. Like, I know there will be people listening to this that work from home and they sit on their laptop all day chatting to people. Then they close their laptop and sit on the sofa, and then that's the rest of the day, right? And you haven't seen a single person, even though you've interacted through a screen quite a lot. But that's not inherently who we are as beings. We need that kind of social connection and interaction.
Well, how young is this whole scenario that we find ourselves in? How young is social media in comparison to how long we've been around for? Like this situation that we find ourselves in now with online jobs, influencers, creators, it scares me. It scares me, especially because I'm in that generation where I've had, a quote unquote normal job before this and moved into this world. So I have some connection still with, I guess, what I would call reality of having a paid job and knowing how that feels. I'm also worried for people who I see, taking out car finances and mortgages on 12-month social media contracts, and the repercussions of that have people I've already seen. And like you said, people who are living jobs, especially post-COVID era, where they may not see anybody because they're working from home. It's such a new scenario that we're not used to having. There's actually a study done, the longest study on happiness in human history was done by Harvard. I think it was an 80-year study where they studied the contributors to happiness, the main contributors to happiness, and the main conclusion that they drew from the study is that our main, I guess, causation of happiness is how wealthy and healthy our relationships are and the community that we have around us. It's so, so, so important. And although we are more connected than ever, it just feels like a lot of those connections and conversations that we have just don't feel visceral. They feel fake because they're not they're not face to face. We can't see people's emotions, body language, touch, feel, senses. And yeah, it definitely worries me.
I think as well, when you mention, the car finance, the mortgage things on a year contract, whether that be a work contract or an influencer contract or however we're looking at it, I think that want of things is becoming worse and worse and worse. And that's been something we've had, right? Everybody always wants more or wants to strive to the next thing or the bigger thing or the better thing, the better car, the bigger house, etc. Like that's been a thing throughout history. But I think now because we're getting it delivered to us so often and it's there in our faces that this person has this thing or this person has that thing. I need that as well. That becomes that instant gratification over kind of actually putting yourself in a position where that is a sustainable thing to do. And I think that's a real problem, that kind of that 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 instant gratification that not just social media, but kind of everything in this, as you say, new world, this young thing
Yeah.
seems to bring.
I think it's such a difficult thing, isn't it? Like the comparison thing through social media is so difficult, and people like to pretend they don't care what other people think, but I think if you pretend that you don't care what other people think, you would be a complete sociopath because everybody, walks past the house, which is a little bit bigger than theirs, and compares or pulls up at the traffic lights and sees the fancier cars than theirs and thinks and compares. Everybody does it in some way. The difference that we now have is the algorithms push the top 1% of the world or the country that you live in your face, and you're constantly comparing to them, which isn't real life. You know, 20, 30 years ago, when the only people your mum and dad would have to compare to is the people that they would see down the Asda on the weekly food shop.
Yeah.
It's just two completely different scenarios, and never in human history have we had to contend with that.
Yeah. Do you find yourself having to check in with yourself as well? Because like I speak about this all the time, and I'm sure that I know you push the message all the time as well. Like, but do you ever find yourself falling back into that trap of kind of comparison?
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah.
when you're living life on social media, it's something that I try to do less and less of. It's human nature for you to fall into those traps of comparison. Sometimes they can just come in different ways. For me, it used to be my body because that's what I was valued for. I think one of the questions that you probably need to ask yourself is when it comes to that is, do people like or love me for who I am or for what I do? And when you start to really get to grips with that question, it can be powerful in helping with that sort of thing because I thought that people liked me because of what I did and not who I was. And when that's being the fitness guy, at some point you're gonna have to take time out or you're gonna be injured or something's gonna happen. And then I guess you lose all of your identity, which is a really difficult thing to do. So to kind of find an answer to that question of who you are, I think it can help with that. But you definitely need to try and protect yourself. You need to be, I guess, sieving your social media every now and again, following accounts that don't particularly serve you. Like I've unfollowed people before who I even like. It's nothing against them. It was my own issue. I think there's nothing wrong with doing that. I know we all get into a position where it's like the circus. We like to peer in and have a look in, and it's difficult to pull yourself back away because you're constantly looking at what's going on and maybe the freak act that is it right in front of you. But sometimes the best thing that you can do is pull away from it. I guess it's a little bit like when you come out of a friendship or relationship, there's often that rule of, 30 days no contact. If you want to truly erase something from your mind and existence, you need to make it as difficult as possible for you to see that thing and see that trigger.
And you mentioned the word identity. It's strange because I think people sometimes put this kind of like pin in their identity, right? They're like, that is who I am and that is what I do. And we don't move or we don't stray away from that. But like we've already talked about, like inherently as people, we change. Like throughout our life, we change, which means our identity is going to change. So if you're like spearheading yourself or kind of cementing yourself to a specific identity, that at some point is going to go wrong because you can't stay the same person and do the same thing for your whole life. That just doesn't happen, does it?
No, you wear multiple hats, don't you? At some point in your life, you're going to be
100%.
a father. You're going to be a father, and you identify as a father, or an uncle, or a husband, or a cousin. And I guess this, I've spoken about this before. It comes down to really finding out what you want to want. I think so often in society we're told what we should want, like value the Rolex or the car or the house, or we're constantly pushed marketing material of what is of value. And it's not until I think you find out what you want to want, and the way that you answer that is to find out again, who am I? Who do I want to be? And I think once you start to find the values of you and why people like you, it makes it easier to find out, okay, once I've established that, now I can find out what I want to want and the things that make me happy and be selfish with those things. And of course your identity is going to change. And sometimes you may even feel lost because your identity changes. I don't necessarily, this is a big thing I think people get into poor mental states with is when they feel lost in life. And sometimes we end up in that position where we've gone through a transition and maybe you're changing identity and you feel lost. Being lost isn't a bad thing. Because ultimately you're searching for questions, you're looking to be found again. And when you're on that search, you're gonna find maybe a better, more improved version of you, or just the you in the next chapter of life.
I suppose, like, zooming out and looking at it from that way, when you're lost, you're on the way to discovering something new most of the time, aren't you? Which tends to be the time where you, like, develop the most as a person, whether that be, you know, through your relationships, your finances, like, whatever facet. When you're lost, you need to, like you say, kind of find somewhere, which again, like, leads to development, which I think sometimes people forget. People don't like, they think they're sorted and they're never gonna change again, and it kinda comes back to that identity point, doesn't it? That you're always evolving, you're always changing.
Yeah, I think things like that happen. Like if someone would have said to
Yeah,
me, like, picked me out of life and said, "This is where you're gonna be in a year's time," I would have just said,
it's
"You're batshit
wild.
crazy."
Yeah,
And the people
yeah.
who are in my life now, the place where I am, uh, the way that I'm living life could not have been more opposite. And this is what I say to people, like, you just never know what's gonna happen in a year. Never, never, never know. The best case scenario and the worst case scenario, you just never know what is to come.
I mean, speaking personally as well, like, I've certainly had one of those years, and I had a moment, I was out on a run the other day, and I was just, when you're, like, reflecting back, you're not really thinking about a huge amount, and then your brain picks one point and you're like, "Right, okay, this for some reason, that's the thing that gets spiraling." And I was reflecting back on the last year, and I was, like, trying to list the things that had changed, and, like, I'd gone from, like, 10 years of um, being pretty solid in a lot of facets of my life to then a year of so much fundamental change in every big part. And it's like, as you say, if you picked me up a year ago and put me where I am now, I wouldn't have believed you. But actually standing here now, um, I wouldn't have changed any of that because it's made me who I am and it will make me who I am in the future. But it's just weird to reflect back on it, isn't it?
I think it's difficult for people who are in a position of extreme change or pain. And if you listen to this podcast now, if you're in a position where you're feeling particular discomfort or, emotional turmoil or change, and you find it really difficult, it's hard to look at a year from now and see yourself in that position. Because when I found myself in that position of, a lot of emotional pain and discomfort, it's like it's like being in a dark tunnel and everything feels numb and everything just feels difficult. And you basically have two options with that. One is that you can pull up a chair and continue to sit in that dark tunnel, or two, you can start to make the uncomfortable, painful, difficult steps to move towards the light. And you just need to start taking one step at a time, because you've got to do the things that make you feel better for tomorrow, and that's all that you can focus on, because anything else is going to feel way too difficult. I know Jordan Peterson talks about this quite a lot, even kind of simplifying it further. I know in his book he talks about the first thing that you should do is clean your own room before you start putting the world in order. And even before that, for some people, tidying their own room can feel like a daunting task. So tidying the first drawer, like start with the smallest thing first, that creates momentum for you to start feeling positive and giving yourself evidence that you can do things, you can get yourself up and move along, but don't jump too far ahead.
And even in those moments of change, like, and when you are sitting in that dark tunnel before that change, I think when you're out of that and you can reflect back, when you get to a point where you can reflect back, you actually realize that remaining on that chair in that tunnel can actually be way worse, and a lot of the time is way harder than actually going towards the light and making that fundamental change and just kind of moving through that. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Because when you're in it, you're like, oh, I don't want to change it. It's going to be too painful, whatever the reason is, and whatever you're trying to change in your life. And then actually, as I say, when you go through that process, it's like, oh, fuck, maybe I should have done that sooner.
Dude,
It's
the
so
thing
weird.
that's crazy about this, the thing that's crazy about it with this as well, and once you've been through it, it can feel this. What I'm gonna say can sound just, pretty strange, but because through the most painful situations in your life is where you will learn the most and self-develop the most. I found myself getting almost to a point where I was addicted to the pain, because I was like, I knew on the other side of it, I was going to self-develop and there's going to be a lot of change there. And whether that be with, your fitness journey, or whether that be with something that you're facing in life, or difficulty or adversity, once you start to realize that on the other side of adversity is usually something, pretty good, or a lesson that you've learned, it can sometimes be difficult not to lean into those things and continue to challenge yourself too much, and then just be content with life. And one of the biggest things that taught me that was, when I completed the farmer's carry 2 or 3 years ago, 24 hours farmer's carry for the world record. And I remember getting 9 hours through, carrying these 100-pound handles, and I thought I tore my bicep. I was like, there's just no way I can carry on. There's no chance I can do another 15 hours of this. And I thought to myself, but I know I can take, one more step. I knew all the time it was possible for me to take one more step, or I could take another 100 meters, and I'd break it down like that. And I'm like, I can do another 100 meters. Do you know what? I can do another 100 meters. And you've got to apply that same logic with the days, I guess, that go on in your week. You might not be able to see the end of the week or the end of the month, but you can see the end of today, and that's the best place to start.
Yeah, for people that don't know about that, I wanted to mention that farmer's carry record. You did that on a 400-meter track, right? What what was the actually, I think when you were living in Chester, I don't live too far away from Chester at all, so I actually pretty sure I saw you on a training run with the weights at one point, and I was like, "What is going on there?" Before I knew who you are or what you were doing. Yeah, just give kind of a little bit of an insight into what that record was, how you kind of prepared for it, and then the night and day itself.
Yeah, man, I think a few people saw me on the
Yeah.
12-week training camp leading up to carrying these big. If anyone who's trying to visualize what they look like, these handles are like big, tall cylinders about a foot long, and they're 50
Almost
pounds
like
each. So they're
almost like
like
weighted,
milk jugs.
fire extinguishers type things.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah,
it kind of,
yeah.
yeah.
Some people message like, "Oh, saw you today, walking through wherever with the handles, and you didn't wave back." I'm like, dude, have you ever tried doing a front raise with 50 pounds? It's like it's not fucking easy. So yeah, that was a thing. But the the farmer's carry came off the back of, me having a testicular cancer scare 2 years ago, and I wanted to do something for guys who weren't as lucky as me, or guys who suffered with mental health afterwards, in carrying the weight for those who couldn't. And that's where the whole concept of the challenge came about, because I wanted to raise money with Movember for both men's mental health and, testicular cancer. And obviously, fortunately, I broke the world record, which was held before me by someone else who did 50 kilometers, and I ended up doing 54 kilometers. And we also became one of the biggest fundraisers in the UK for men's mental health that year, which is just an amazing thing to come of it. And this is where I'm talking about, off the back of adversity of a potential cancer scare, was one of the greatest achievements, for both me personally and raising money for others.
What was the recovery like from that? Because your arms must have been absolutely, well, your whole body must be battered, but your arms must have been in bits.
Yeah, dude, it felt like I've been hit by a bus.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was not a nice feeling. And more so, the other thing that just gets messed up is your sleep. I found it really difficult because I was like, wow, I'm gonna sleep for so long after I've done this 24 hours. But because the adrenaline was just pumping, I probably didn't sleep really for 2 days or 2.5 days. So trying to get back into a normal rhythm after that was difficult. But yeah, I don't think I did farmers carry for a long time
Yeah.
after that. I was just known as probably the legitimate best shopping bag carrier in the world. Yeah, pretty
Hey,
useless
man,
skill.
it was a good title to have. Get that on the Tinder, innit? In terms of like, I've done a 24-hour track race, and the sleep thing's a really interesting thing because, yeah, that's the thing that so many people say, right? They say like, "Oh, I bet after that you slept like class. I bet like," and you're like, "No, I actually just lay there like really annoyed with myself that I can't sleep." I'm like
Yeah,
telling my body like, "Mate, you need to like shut down because I need to recover here. Like I need to be a real person again." But
yeah,
like you say, everything's so out of whack. It just that doesn't happen for so long.
yeah. It's like people who do big travel. Even me coming to Australia last week, I pretty much didn't sleep really for like 30 hours. I thought, oh, I can't wait to get a good night's sleep when I get there. Body was like,
No.
no, not happening, Ben. Like you're staying up, boy. So yeah, I think it's sleep is such a strange thing because the body is such a creature of habit and loves the same sleep and wake up time. Is that when you start to mess with that circadian rhythm, it really does impact you and your HRV and your overall recovery for a good, for me it was at least a week.
I wanted to touch on the traveling kind of facet of your life at the moment, and I think that's quite an interesting place to get into it because you are here, there, and everywhere at the moment. I know you're spending a lot of time out in Oz and back to the UK and back out to Oz. Then, when you're doing what you do, like you've got a very busy business in based in the UK. You've got your own fitness journey as well, and your own competitive journey when you're in that part of your training cycle. Like, how do you find that sort of that routine, like getting off routine, getting on back onto routine? Is that difficult, or like how do you kind of do that?
I think the thing for me is I've really realized how pivotal environment is over the
Okay.
past year to 2 years. And what I mean by that is the the easiest way to change your life is to change your environment. And the reason because that is like if you are living in a position where you've got bad habits or things are going on, the easiest way is to remove yourself from those triggers and those cues. Obviously, I'm not saying for everybody to just pack up and move their life and shoot across the other side of the world, because I think often people do that and then they return, the same problems are still there. Because at the same time, when you go and experience a different environment, a different place, whilst you're there, you've got to do the work and you've got to change the way that you also view the world, not just the place in which you move in the world. And that's an important part of it. So environment is so important wherever you decide to put yourself, because you got to think about the things that come, and spiral off environment, which is wherever you decide to place yourself is, you know, going to really influence friendships, relationships, potentially career, lifestyle, food you're going to eat, car you're going to drive, house you're going to live in. It's a really important decision. And the reason why I come back to where I am in Oz now on the Gold Coast and back and forth is because it's just a great environment for me to work and train in. There's a lot of like-minded individuals and there's a lot of sun, which definitely helps. I think it's one of the things we miss in the UK. And in the UK, I have the same thing. I have a great family and great set of friends. So I have two great environments to be able to go to and from, which I really enjoy. So for me, it's never that much of a struggle and issue. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes when I travel to places, it's really difficult, but when I guess you've already kind of got a semi-prepared setup to be able to go to
Yeah.
in terms of training, and working, they kind of ground you quite well when you've moved to a situation in a different place.
I was going to mention about, you're obviously close to your family and all that, and that's got to be something that can be a little bit difficult, right? When you're out in a completely different time zone, like how do you make sure you still nurture? We've talked about the importance of relationships. Like how do you make sure you still nurture those relationships when you are like on a totally different time zone?
Yeah, it can be difficult obviously because the time zone for Oz is completely different to the UK. I guess it's being more selfish, in the sense of not giving too much of my time away to everybody. I was having a conversation about this today. I think sometimes we think, somebody, it can be, insert any name, they're terrible with communication. Like, is that person really terrible with communication, or have we just become so connected with WhatsApp and messages and whatever that we just expect this real quick response all the time? Again, going back 20, 30 years ago, you might have got an email or a phone call every now and again, or someone had a conversation, but now because we're so connected, our expectations are a lot higher. So for me, I might not get back to WhatsApps for a while, to some people, but I'll tend to try and I'm a big FaceTime guy, so I'll try and FaceTime family as much as possible, especially my two little nephews who I love to bits. So I'll try and get on with them as much as possible and prioritize the people that I can, because I only have each day so much energy to be able to give, and I want to give that to the right people. And even with that, I think there's a great analogy, especially when you've got low energy, you've got a low amount of time, is that you want to try and be around treadmill people, not sofa people. And what I mean by that is you want to be around people who give you energy to feel like you want to get up and go for a run or do something, not feel like you need to lie down after you spend time with them. Like, there's two different types of people who give and take energy from you. I think that's super important. I think that was one of the lessons that I read from a really good book by Greg McKeown called Essentialism. It's all about minimalism and removing things or people from life that potentially don't serve you anymore.
The word selfish as well. You said it at the start of that that little passage. Like inherently, that's negative, isn't it? You call somebody selfish, and it's like, oh, this is a negative thing. It's a negative part of their personality. But actually, the word selfish can be incredibly positive when applied in the correct way.
Yeah, I can. I think I was under the same illusion. I was listening to a podcast. I think it might have been Lewis Howes who was talking about this. He was asked the question of, I think, prioritizing his wife and kids. Um, and he said to his wife, "You're not my number one priority. You're my number three priority. I'm number one priority. Kids number two, and you're number three." And the reason for that is because unless I look after myself first, I can't then deliver and give you the best version of me and treat you in the best way possible, because I'm serving from a crappy, low self-esteem position. And if I put myself and prioritize myself first, it means that you're looked after in the best way possible and get the best version of me. So by me prioritizing myself means that essentially I'm, prioritizing your well-being, life, love, and everything that comes with that as well, which I thought sounds, if you were to read that on paper, like a really, I guess, inhumane, selfish thing to say to your partner, but it was meant with the best intentions.
I remember there's a piece in the film Free Solo, the Alex Honnold film where he climbs El Capitan, and his partner at the time says, "Would you ever think about stopping climbing for me?" or something to that kind of feeling. And he's just like, without a breath, no. He's like, no. And when you first hear that, I remember first hearing that and thinking that is kind of the most selfish thing in the world. But kind of on the surface level, it's like, well, no, and I'm taking like it quite general here, but that's what makes him who he is. Like without, if he was going to stop that and stop doing the things that he loved to do, inherently that's going to change him. And I think when forced change happens, if you were going to ask somebody to stop doing something that they love, then that becomes an issue because they become the person that they're not, and then the person that you met isn't the person that they become, and it's like it's that whole spiraling thing, isn't it? Of like again focusing on you as a person and you as the number one priority, even though, as you say, when you were if you were to read it, it might sound completely mental. I just wanted to ask quickly about Boys Will Be Boys.
hmm
Just talk to me about that, like how that first came to fruition and what kind of the mission is for that?
Yeah, so the Boys Will Be Boys project came about. It was all around taking men back to positions that they thrived at with boys, playing in the mud, being in tree houses, being in water, being around fire, doing the things that really kind of got their soul alive. So I've run a couple of retreats where essentially guys will spend the weekend in treehouse in the woods, learn how to firelight, survival skills. We'll do some orienteering. There's a lot of fitness involved and running a lot involved, spending time on the water in canoes, just getting guys bonding over activities and through experiences that, yeah, are enjoyable. And there's kind of a bit of change going on with that movement at the moment, because I'm running another thing called Carry the Weight Club. So we're potentially looking at merging the two things, because Carry the Weight Club is the meetups I've been running in the UK, and there's one that's going to be going on in Australia through July, with Movember over here as well, where we pull big groups of guys together, essentially just to try and get more guys out active and meeting other like-minded individuals. And then we create groups within WhatsApp for people to communicate afterwards and stuff as well. And it's to signify the sandbags, or to signify, sorry, that it's the weight that men invisibly carry every single day. And to signify that, and to try and cause as much noise and disruption as possible wherever we do it, to create awareness around men's mental health, and as always raise money for it as well.
I think for anybody that's not watching the video version of this, I should say Ben's got a very impressive tash at the moment as well, which is incredible. So make sure you do go
I'm
and
getting in with yeah, I'm doing
yeah.
the whole Movember thing very, very early this year. That's my excuse.
I'm 32, mate, and I've never been able to grow a tash, and I've never been in a position where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna give November a go. I think this year might be the year where I try and do something. Um,
Go for it,
just a
bro.
couple,
Go for it.
yeah, it'll
Every
be
time I come to
horrible.
Australia, I end up growing a mustache. So it must be something in the Australian water.
Yeah, mine's gonna be absolutely awful, but we'll go with it. Um, just a couple more, man. I think one thing that I've got throughout this whole conversation, right, is that you are you're a person that loves helping people, and I think with that comes obviously a lot of very positive things for you as an individual as well. But I think when you're helping other people, sometimes you can forget to help yourself. Like how by helping people so much, how do you remind yourself that you still need to kind of focus on your own journey too?
I think I still fuck this up, dude. I was having
Yeah.
this conversation today and yesterday with two friends, and I sometimes wake up in on a day and I feel like I'm in the red. I've got to do such and such and complete such a task, or do such and such a thing to be in the green. And I think when you're someone who's looking to either help other people or help yourself in terms of self-development, there's this really difficult internal battle that goes on between being content and wanting to be better. Because if you're wanting to be better, you're pretty much saying to yourself, at the moment, I'm pretty much not good enough, which is where content is. And if we're at a level of content, then maybe we're not asking ourselves to be better and self-develop. So this is a battle that I'm really interested in at the moment, and something that I face every day. And there's things like gratitude and being grateful for where I'm at and doing those things in the morning that definitely help. But I would love to say I have the answers to, but I just don't. It's one of those
Yeah.
things that I think I would love to know. I'm definitely exploring and leaning more into myself. I guess being here was definitely one of those ways, and one of those ways of life which is a little bit different, which forced me to take my foot off the pedal a little bit. I'm still going to be ambitious and still going to be goal driven, but I think maybe the type of people and the level of wealth sometimes is a difference, because people are just throwing a pair of shorts on and walking down the beach, don't really give a shit about what car you're driving or the shoes that you've got on. And even one of the big things that I noticed was that, even spending a bit of time in London last year, I'd often hear conversations of, people talking about business, the career that they're doing, what they're doing in work that day. Whereas I listened into a lot of conversations around coffee shops, especially on the Gold Coast, and people are talking about what they're doing after work or what they're doing outside of work, which was just kind of two different mindsets. So I think being around people who are wanting to do that and wanting to do things outside of work and wanting to do things with community is and does help. with that in a sense as well.
I think sometimes as well when you're like the word contentness is so interesting because it's like, have you ever had that period in your life, and I'm sure you have, where you're like, for some reason at that moment you feel settled and you're like, right, why do I feel like this? It's almost like you're waiting then for something to go wrong. I think actually when you're, or when I've been the most content, quote unquote, in my life, is it, it's when I'm searching for contentness. And that sounds so weird. It sounds so counterintuitive, but every time I'm in a point where so maybe from someone from the outside looking in would think, oh, he's happy, he's content, quote unquote. There are actually times where I've always felt worse. It's those times where I'm searching for it, where it's like, no, this is where I am the happiest. So I think that means a different thing to everybody as well, doesn't it?
I think that's genuinely because and can be pinned down to that like getting the thing is always better than when you got the thing. The process is always feels better than when you finally got it. And the thing that was the pinnacle of this for me was when I spoke about it last year was when I'd materialistically I ordered like my dream car and I saw it being processed for like a year, sprayed, sent to different countries, shipped to me, whatever. And that process of designing it and doing the things was way better than when I got it. When I got it, I was like obviously excited, but it's always underwhelming because our expectations always outweigh reality. So getting things is way better than having things. And I think if you can think about that, I think that probably encaptures the exactly what you've just been talking about because you found yourself maybe just being content with something, but then you're maybe thinking about the next thing or kicking the can further down the road, which is what we often do.
Mate, I think the word masculinity, right, is such a buzzword. And I'm not going to ask you like specifically what does it mean to you because like at the moment it's a mad discussion and it seems like I don't know. I think the word masculinity actually can be quite an unhealthy buzzword because it brings up loads of negative feelings to a lot of people. I think this whole conversation has technically been about like, or a lot of it has been what it means to be a man in the kind of the modern world. But like, what do you see as the big challenges, I guess, for men on a day to day basis?
Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation, and there's a couple of things that sometimes annoy me around it. Someone asked me today, like, what are my thoughts on toxic masculinity? I don't think there's any such thing as toxic masculinity. I think there's toxic people. I think there's toxic men. I think there's toxic women. But attaching that to masculinity, I just think it just gives it a really bad undertone. The other thing that I just really don't like, and I speak about this in a lot of my men's retreats, is that I often say to people the reason why I'm sure you're here today as a man is because you are a brother, a husband, an uncle, um, uh, you know, etc., etc., etc. And the reason why you're here to try and create a better version of yourself today is so that you can also be the best partner you can be to your girlfriend or your wife or your daughter or your sister. Like you showing up as the best person that yourself can be is such a great thing for everybody in the world, not just for men. And I think the thing that really annoys me with social media is that this whole, clickbait gender war thing men and women were created to work in perfect harmony. And I think when men and women have great synergy together, where men support women and women support men, great things happen. But there's a small echo chamber online of people who like just to create gender wars. Like people need to understand the internet is not representative of what the general public think. It's just a small, minute loud voices and we think that it's applicable to everything and everyone. It's not. The vast majority of men and women are in synergy with each other and work far better when we help each other. It's not about segregating people. And that's the thing that I think social media does a lot of the time and creates hate towards either gender.
We're so behind. Like you said, this is all so new, but we're so behind in kind of like the education towards all of this because it I was like, having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was like, it feels like people need to be taught this. Like kids that are like coming through school now need to be taught like everything you're seeing on your phone, like that's not life. Like that is only a very small proportion of actually what living means. I think that's scary because, as you say, it is so new. And where are we going to be in 10 years' time? And what is going to be you know, what is going to be the next thing? It's mad.
Yeah, I know, mate. I think it's just that's why you need to take your head out of the bubble sometimes and
Yeah.
see what's really, really going on around you. I think with the whole masculinity thing, there's definitely a lot more men that are suffering more than ever, and I think it requires more men to stand up and be counted and be good role models for people. Because what happens when there's no good male role models is that unfortunately that void is then sucked in like a vacuum with someone who has the loudest voice and isn't necessarily the best role model for men. So I think the more conversations like this that happen, the more that positive male groups come together, yeah, the more positive outcome we're going to see roll on from that as well in terms of the statistics long term around men's mental health.
If somebody is sitting in that tunnel and they are listening to this conversation, and we'll finish with this, man, because, you know, they're without the person realizing that maybe the step needs to be taken, the step won't be taken. But is there something that you heard or read or listened to that maybe might help somebody take that first step to maybe getting out of that dark tunnel, picking up that camp chair and moving towards the light?
I'm a big believer that your mental health that lies directly upstream from your physical. So I think starting with the things that you know are going to make you feel better, like, even if it's not going for the workout because you feel like that's too much of a burden and then putting more stress on your body, even if it's going for the walk or going for the run or going and being outside is a positive first step in moving your body. It gets the endorphins released, it gets the feel good factor going. It makes you feel like you completed some kind of task. It gives you creative time to think. Another thing that I'm a big advocate of is non-actionable spaces, which is basically where you just spend like maybe 5 or 10 minutes per day in a place where there's no screens, there's no stimulus, there's no external, noise. Because how often is your thoughts actually your thoughts versus how often are the thoughts things that have been implanted in your head by whatever you're watching or listening to? So just being at peace in like it could be a back garden, just sat on a step, just thinking about your own thoughts. I think that's definitely a good place to be. But again, I don't think you can outthink these things. I don't think, having more sleep is the answer. I think taking action is what creates evidence, and then what creates confidence to you believing in yourself again. So I think doing the things like going for the walk, getting up out of bed, self-care is a big thing. Starting to look after yourself again and showing yourself some respect is a surefire way. Going to the gym, go and do something active, and then making yourself look and feel like a better version of of yourself. I know that there's a big thing, a big term around fake positivity, but I think there's a lot to be said about putting out into the universe and the belief that you have. And for people who don't have self-belief in themselves, there's this really, really easy exercise and task that I read in a book this week, which is called "Who Say You Can't, You Do." And what you do is, and it's just a really simple analogy of how visualization works or putting things out into the world works, is that you basically will sit there and close your eyes, and then you will imagine yourself holding out a piece of paper in front of you with your name on it. And you can feel your name, you can see your name, you know that your name's there, but it's only in your mind. And then following that, you will physically get a piece of paper, and like, if you listen to this now, do it. Like, write your name on the piece of paper and hold out in front of you. And now what you've just done is shown that something that was only in your imagination mere seconds ago is now a reality. You visualized something and then you created it. It's now in front of you. It's now no longer in your mind. And you have the ability to do the exact same thing. You have the ability to visualize and then create something. You're in control. But you just got to believe in yourself again, that by thinking these things and putting it in front of you, that you can then create. And it's the simplest step possible to put that into practice.